What's up, Jay? How you doing, man?
What up, E-Rock? How are you, man?
Doing all right. It's been a little while, but we're back. It's the Howl podcast. My name's Eric Holmes. I'm with Howl, and my friend here.
My name's Jay Kakati. How are you?
Doing fine, man. Uh, so tonight we're going to talk to these musicians and bands about getting signed by a major or independent label. What does a label look at? Do you really need to get signed? And also how to make sure you don't sign contracts, which we talked about in the other podcast as well.
That's right.
So, first things first, I guess, the way, this is the obvious, but the way that music is consumed, it's a lot more diverse now. In the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, it was radio, television, and word of mouth, and that was pretty much it. We're just, taking a stab on some random records at the store, spending your $17.99 and hoping there was a good song.
That's right.
Any of those you remember, Jay, that you wish you wouldn't have bought?
Oh, for sure, man. A lot of them.
Like Green Jelly, remember that band? Little Pigs, anyway. So, not only that, but the recording equipment that's available with your computer. Everyone can be in a band today. So basically, it's just, you're up against thousands and thousands of bands now. How do you stand out? What's a major label? How do they find people? What do you do, right?
Yeah, that's the $1,000,000 question is how do you get their attention? And
so, Jay,
go ahead. Yeah.
I say, you want to talk a little bit about what Pop Evil did kind of at the beginning?
Yeah, sure. Pop Evil is one of my major clients. I've been working with Pop Evil for about 15 years now. What they did was, they stayed persistent. They figured out a marketing strategy that dealt with areas that you normally wouldn't think about. For example, the major markets where I'm from, obviously, is Detroit. You have Cleveland, you have Toronto, those are pretty much the major cities, Chicago, within the general vicinity of our area. Pop Evil stayed away from those areas. They certainly hit those markets, but they focused on other sort of intermediary markets such as Flint, Grand Rapids, Toledo, Fort Wayne, Indiana, towns that had significant pull in terms of radio and promotional people from the record labels, and they learned that through the grind. They learned that through people that they trusted and booking agents and other bands that had succeeded. But they stayed out of those areas where they were a dime a dozen, and they really gave some love to those other areas and played and played and played until finally they broke down some walls, and the rest is history. We can certainly get into more detail, but my advice is, and what they did, is they focused on markets that were important, but markets that weren't necessarily getting the same love as the Detroits or the Chicagos of the world.
Definitely. And, I think the most important thing is, the songs. Do you have a hit song? Do you have a song that's marketable, whether it's a niche or, it's more of a mainstream song? A hit song is a hit song. And do you have one? And that's not easy to define, I guess. But there's a lot of. Go ahead, Jay.
It just takes a lot of luck, but it takes a lot of history, a lot of talent to write a hit song. There's a lot of good songs out there, but is that song getting the proper exposure? We'll talk about in this podcast different ways to expose your songs nowadays. There's so many different ways, But with that being said, there's so many different songs out there. How are you getting in front of the pack, and really sort of differentiating yourself from anybody else out there? It all comes down to the song. And I can remember that song for most bands that I've worked with that got signed. I can remember that song, and that song took a couple of years to sort of evolve to that place, but it all comes down to that song.
And sometimes it doesn't happen right away, right? I mean, I think Imagine Dragons, they were around for a while before. I mean, I think that song, Why Is My Brain Radioactive, that song was a couple years old, I believe, before it ever got mainstream airplay. And it was probably touched, I'm speaking completely off the cuff here, but it was probably touched by a couple of different producers until they nailed the right mix and had the right cut of it, and it just happens,
Yeah, you never know when that song's going to take off and touch the right person, and just take off. And Imagine Dragons certainly has had some luck, but they've been around, and obviously they're a strong, solid group, and they're succeeding. So, yeah, just it takes that one song. I know for Pop Evil, it was one song that broke down a program director at a radio station, and that little really opened the doors a lot for Pop Evil, and helped them get to know their manager, helped them get to find a producer. It really sort of broke down some walls for them.
Definitely. Yeah, and radio is still a big part of breaking new music. A recent Jacobs Media study, a company I used to work for, I believe it was 80% of people still use radio to, find their new music. And it's one of the many avenues, but it's still used by a majority of people to, to find out what's hot. So radio is a part of the puzzle, and having a hit song. But a couple of other things that we're going to look at. Are you making money?
Right. Yeah, I mean.
Hey Jay, you're.
What's that? My volume's not working?
No, it's echoing.
Oh, sorry about that. Turn it down.
No worries. But yeah, labels are going to look at your financial situation, and they are going to wonder, are you profitable? Are you? Have you been selling records? Have you been selling tickets? They're going to really look at that.
Yeah, what's your story? Labels are, in essence, they're businesses. So, how are they, if they're going to invest money into you, are they going to have a good chance of returning their investment? And, for them, it's about how many records have you sold by yourself? How many people can you bring to a show? What's your crowd following? What's your social media networking look like? All of those things come into play, and I would call that a story for a band when it comes down to negotiating deals for record labels, independent labels, major labels. All of that comes into play.
Definitely. You just touched on the last 2 points of this too. Are you marketable? Do you have a phone? Those are the last two pieces of the puzzle, in my opinion. The marketable part, that can be engaged on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. That's not everything though. Just having Facebook likes and Twitter followers doesn't mean you have a following. It doesn't mean you're marketable.
Right.
You can buy those labels, know that, and they can tell when you're buying likes.
Right.
So don't think that they're not, paying attention to that. If your band has 1,000 likes and you send your stuff in and they're talking to you, and 2 weeks later you're at 40,000 likes, they're not stupid.
Yeah, I mean, it can be something as big as Facebook and looking at that, but yes, they do have ways to tell what's real and what's not. But keep it simple. How are the fans reacting to you? how are people reacting to you? Are they reacting to you in good ways? And get outside of your circle. Where I'm not talking about your mom. I'm not talking about your girlfriend. I'm talking about people that you never met before. How are they reacting to your music? If they're reacting positively, then there's some marketability there. There's no question about it. So keep it real simple. That those things are occurring on a regular basis, on a consistent basis. Start to build on that. And that's the key. You got to be able to build on that one fan at a time. It's like a politician. You've got to shake hands and kiss babies every night. You've got to get out there and play shows. Can't be afraid to do that, whether it's a cover show or whether it's just your opening show. You've got to be able to get out there and pound the pavement.
It's a great point, Jay, with making sure you're playing this for the right people, because if you're playing it for your mom, your girlfriend, your boyfriend, whatever, and your close friends and a couple other friends, when they know you're in the band and you're asking them for their opinion, what are they supposed to tell you? I mean, how many of your friends are really going to say to you, yeah, dude, this song sucks, or I mean, that's a big problem. I mean, you got to find ways to play it for people like, that don't know you. Say, hey, my friend's band, or hey, I'm thinking about signing this band or something like that. Come up with a way to play it for random people where they don't have, you're not standing right in front of them where they have to tell you face to face, the reality. They can do that knowing that you're thinking you're not in the band.
Get outside of your element. I can remember, Eric, I think you and I worked on this band together. I won't mention any names, but they refused to get out of their area.
Yeah.
They were from a very cool town, but they refused to get out of that town, and I think that really did them a disservice. You have to get outside of your comfort zone. You can't
For sure.
To get out there, go to a place where nobody's heard you before, and play and see how people react, and that'll give you a good sense of how somebody would react at a major label. I mean, they're human. They hear music every day.
Yep. And one little hint I'll tell you too is working at a radio station and for radio consulting companies for the last 13 years. I can't tell you how many demos that I got from bands where it was a blank CD, on the top, and they had a handwritten, hey, our band is named X, and here's our music. You're up against. It doesn't matter how good your music is. You're up against, thousands of other bands. I mean, you have to present it in a way that's professional. If you don't take it seriously, other people aren't even going to look at it. Your chances just got knocked down drastically.
It's almost, I don't want to say it doesn't happen, but it is a very, very low percentage of bands or individual artists that get signed on just sending in a demo. I mean, it just almost does not happen.
Right.
So I don't want to say don't do those things, but really, these things don't happen overnight typically. You look at anybody's story and how they succeeded. Most of those people had a lot of failures, but they persisted at it, and they continued on their dreams, and eventually they broke down some walls and succeeded at it. So, don't be discouraged if you don't hear back, if you send in that demo tape to whoever and you don't hear back. Don't get discouraged. Keep persistent, but don't put a lot of hope and a lot of faith when you send in that demo that somebody's just gonna see lightning strike and ultimately give you a six-figure deal. I've never been around something like that happening. I'm not saying that it doesn't, but I certainly the deals that I've done that has not happened.
Yeah. The big money days are pretty much over unless you've got such an amazing following that by the time the label gets to you that you're worth it. You can prove that you're worth it. The chances of you getting any kind of real big upfront check are pretty slim. So Jay, back to the first question we were talking about, the first topic. you know, getting signed by a major or independent label. We'll go to a major label. I mean, should a band really shoot for that, or should they stick with the independent route? What do you think about? What's your take on shooting for the major or sticking with the independent route here?
Here's my humble opinion about it. I think you should shoot for being an entrepreneur. I think you should shoot for being in business for yourself. I think that ultimately, if you succeed, the major label or the independent label will come calling when it's time. I think that starting a band and looking for success as signing a major label deal um, generally is not where most people would probably want to be when everything gets sort of laid out on the table. I think that if you're starting a band, I think you should look at it as a business. I think you should look at it as your own business, and I think you should grow it as big as you can grow it until you need the proper people to help assist you, the proper manager, the proper business manager, the proper attorney, the proper label, and those people will come when it's time. Um, Not that I'm certainly a believer in majors and independents. Majors, there's only a few now, but they have the dollars that typically independents don't. And they have the promotional teams and things like that some independents don't have the advantage of. But it depends on the genre too. There's a lot of successful independent labels, especially here in Michigan. I'm sure in California too. That do very well for a certain genre of music. So you got to do your homework on who you're going to get in bed with. Simple as that. But I think you should start in reality and learn that you need to grow it as much as you can grow it. Sell as many CDs as you can by yourself. Play as many shows as you can. Get in front of as many people as you can and start to build your following. And that, when we go to sit you down with the major label, put you in a better sort of position to get a deal. Everybody should do the research on what's happening in the business. If this is the business that you choose, read up on Macklemore, read up on how he did his deal. There's a lot of exciting things happening, and that's one of them. But that's a perfect example about how he built his career, and he did it himself. And ultimately, the major label came calling, and it just blew up. That's my opinion on it.
Definitely. Well, cool. Well, real quick, the main points here. What do labels look at here? Do you have a hit song? Are you making money? Are you marketable? Do you have a following? So, those four things. We've talked about it in this podcast. Again, like Jay said, read up on a lot of these guys. You'll get a lot of other ideas as well. And again, most importantly, just stick to your guns and be passionate and treat it like a full-time job and like you're running your own business. And that's all I got to say on this topic, Jay.
Have fun, man. It's only rock and roll, but we like it.
Oh, yeah. Rocking like docking out here in California. I'll talk to you later, Jay.
Amen.
Thanks for joining us. This has been another edition of Howl, second podcast, and we'll see you very soon with another one. Have a good evening.